Hey everybody, welcome back. We're back here, which I'm really excited about because there's purpose for why we're here. And Nate's with us, so I'm really glad. We've got Stetson in the room, we've got KJ in the room, I'm Jenny, and why are we here, KJ?
Oh man. Okay, so just to kick the ball off a bit.
Yeah.
Ooh, I just got the picture of like football. We're kicking the ball down. So to kick the ball,
sports analogies are coming in.
Yeah, here we go. So to get the ball going, Easter Chronicles had been so fun for us.
Mm-hmm.
Just sitting at this table and being able to talk about the things that God has done, the things that God's doing, and the things that God is going to do. It was fun.
Yeah.
And at the end, I was sad. It had been over.
Yeah.
And then there was this idea that it doesn't have to end. It can keep going. It can be brought back from the dead. It can rise again. And so I was like, oh my gosh, this can keep going. And so,
Yeah. I think for me, hearing some of the stories on Easter Sunday itself, meeting people who were here for the first time because they found that podcast, that was really cool. And just hearing from a lot of you that were there and talking about just the impact it had in your week and keeping you grounded. That was one of the things we heard from someone was like, it kept me grounded that week leading up to Easter. And I'm so thankful for that.
Yeah, by far the most meaningful Easter I've ever experienced because of everything we talked about leading up to it. It was great.
Yeah, and as somebody on the receiving end, like, I deeply appreciated what you guys did. Like, I wasn't a part of the creation or any of that, but as somebody who, what you say there about it being meaningful, like, it gave value to every day, and it forced me to think through some things and to actually step into that experience. So it's beautiful. Like, I'm proud of what you guys did. Like, I'm glad that you resurrected it.
Thanks, man.
Again.
Yeah. I think, like, so if I'm going to circle a term, I had fun. It seemed fun. And the people I talked to that came up to me, like, they were happy. There was this happy vibe. And so I think I'm going to assume that God enjoys it when people talk about him.
Yeah.
So if there are people sitting around a table talking about the Bible, talking about his heart, talking about his plan, talking about his grace, his compassion, his character, I think God enjoys it. And there's a form of praise that is happening in verbally sharing the things of God. And so I think that's, as of today, that is our goal. And to kind of take some of the pressure off. So during the Easter Chronicles, there had been specific topics for each day that are just cram-packed. So our goal going forward is kind of to ease up a little bit. It doesn't have to be as potent, but it can be fun. So.
Yeah, that's good. Here's a great example. We're just room to breathe.
The pregnant pause, right?
This is not at all trying to like jettison us into the next like capital T topic. But naturally, like coming out of Easter, my mind has been centered around the topic of resurrection and life and the concept of those things. And it's been cool to think about those things in the context of everything that we experience throughout Holy Week and like this whole journey of Lent that we went on of like we're carrying things that are meant to die. And you and I, we were talking last week of something I wish that like I caught a tie. There was one episode we were talking about people going on a very long journey to Jerusalem for Passover. And instead of purchasing an animal at the temple, they carried the animal with them that whole time. And you brought up this concept of like, you're missing out on something by thinking you can get there and then purchase the animal, but there's something about carrying it with you. And just like the journey of Lent that is of like, yeah, you're carrying something with you that is meant to die. And what does that leave room for? Like we're coming out on the other end of that journey of, for a lot of us, it's like, oh, like we have buried something and walked away. And giving something permission to die, we are stepping into greater room for life to take its
Yeah.
place.
That's good. Yeah, I heard someone say, and I'm sorry, I'm really bad as far as quotes go, but I heard someone say that people are great at bringing things to the foot of the cross, but they're really bad about getting up and going past it. And like there's like this idea of, if you are in Christ, our goal isn't to stay at the foot of the cross.
Right.
It is to actually get up and go.
Mhm.
And I think our season going forward is this getting up and going and asking the question, if I have been brought to life in him or as him, or that whole theology thing, who am I now? Who am I different before than who I had been before,
I like, Stetson, what you're talking about. Like, it's given room and space for something new. Like, that's where my brain goes, for new life to happen, for something new to evolve inside of you and in your relationship with God, or even relationships with people, like what new life can come out of this season, and be fruitful.
That's good. I mean, like, thinking about, can someone who's 88 experience Easter and say, although I've experienced 87 of these, the Easter I just experienced has put me in a place that I haven't ever been before. That would be a good goal, I think, to have this perception of how do I experience Christ, so that I'm always becoming and always being in a place that I have not been before in him.
It's almost like a I don't want to cheapen it by saying this, but like, your New Year's resolution that, 95% of people fail at, like, what does this look like coming out of it, being intentional and having a different spiritual perspective, as opposed to just, well, it's new year, new me,
Yeah, well, that's the big difference between, it's like if during Lent you have the goal of something ending,
Yeah.
like death ends, life doesn't. So it's not like you've never, I don't know, if there was a pursuit of life, you could argue if it truly is life, then you can't ever totally arrive, because if it's life, it's constantly ongoing. You know what I mean?
Well, that kind of makes me think of, yesterday when we were in the sermon feedback meeting, and you were talking about this idea of the Christian life is not this destination we get to, right? When we get to heaven, it's like, oh, cool, we're here, we arrived. It's like, no, like that's actually the beginning. And so you were talking about this idea of we are getting to the beginning of our real life.
Yeah.
In that and there's something
the last
so
beginning
yeah,
of
it's
the
so
Christian
beautiful.
journey. Yeah.
Man, it's good. All right, so I think, like, to ball up some of this is this idea of the feeling of the season that things are in, and even seasonally, this is the beginning of spring, and spring is the season of hope. And I want to talk a bit about hope and the embodiment of hope, and to bring in that sermon just a bit that you just did, because some of the things that you talked about were super, man, I was inside, I was just clapping the whole time, going, this,
I love that.
that's what I saw in my head. I had little
Symbols.
And I was like clapping like
Like the
this.
little monkey.
Yeah, ting, ting, ting. Yeah, it brought such this feeling of confidence and hope. Um, Talk a bit about the experience and the participation of hope that brought this sermon
Hmm.
to be born.
Yeah. So I think I'd say it this way. Like, my life has had some kind of hard experiences in it. And I know that for some of you sitting around this table, you guys have also experienced that. And so when I think about this idea of death and of resurrection, like for me, man, without resurrection, like I don't understand the point of living. Like I really don't. Like, and Paul actually talks about this himself. He's like, all right, let's just eat and drink and tomorrow we die, right? Like if there actually is no thing coming after this thing, if this life is all that we have, then there's no purpose. Like there's no value to being alive. When I think about the things that my mom went through and ultimately her passing, her death, I think, is the thing that gives me hope in resurrection. It's the thing that, and we were talking about this a little bit before, and you can kind of share on this, but like, it's what made my faith real is experiencing loss.
Yeah.
Right. Because loss is really, at the end of the day, it's taking something you should have and stripping it away from you. Like at my age and at the age my mom passed, like I shouldn't have lost a mom, right? I shouldn't have had a family break apart, but I did. But that's the thing that made hope so real for me, because there was this longing for something that was gone. And in my mind, there was just this knowledge I had of like, well, there must be a reality or a place where this thing is not stripped from me. There must be something that I was actually designed for and created for, because I feel this big hole in my life.
Yep. That's awesome. I think that on a similar plane, for like some people who grew up going to church and doing Sunday schools and Bible studies, and I enjoyed the idea of just accessing a ton of theology. I could talk about it. I can talk about different perspectives, and I almost built this theology of I hope it's correct. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I collected a ton of things, and if I had a theology of hope, I hope it's correct, and then I journeyed into a time that my mom got a brain tumor and it had been terminal, and then she quickly died, and that theology of I hope it's correct turned into a theology of it has to be correct. And it turned from something that had been academic. It turned from something that was just like something that was fun to discuss into something that, like, if it isn't real,
Yeah.
I can't go on.
Yeah. Sunday morning, I was getting the kids into the car to go to church. And I forget how it came up, but oh man, what were we talking about? Like, we were talking about somehow my kids just randomly started talking about the new heaven and the new earth,
Oh,
and
really?
like heaven in
As
between.
kids do.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I know.
As pastors,
I know I'm
kids
sounding
do.
super cliche. On my way to church, my kids were talking
Gold
about
streets, baby.
heaven. It's like it was very like exploratory. It was like, yeah. Anyway, so like, and then Magnolia like asked a question. She said, "What would happen like if we didn't go to heaven together, but like as a kid, you went first," which is a
Wow.
terrible thing
Well,
to
I
think
mean,
about.
Yeah,
But
curiosity.
I have a similar story to you, and you is like my mom also died of cancer. And I said, well, that's not going to happen. But if it did, do you know who I think would be waiting for you there? And she said, who? I said, well, Grandma in heaven. Who, like, that's how we talk about her all the time, Grandma in heaven. And Uh, I normally don't pull these up because it's kind of like too painful to, but they were buckled in the car and I was about to start it. And I said, "Do you want to hear her voice?"
Wow.
Mm.
And they're like, "Yeah." And so I pull up some voicemails that she left me that I kept. And the three of us were like listening to my mom's voice again. And they were hearing her voice for the very first time. And it was beautiful in that moment to know it's like that's not going to be the very last time they hear her voice either. But there is a reality, like just as you were saying, it's like when something like that happens, things become very real and not theoretical, but necessary and grounding. And it's when it locks in, it's a hope that permeates everything and shapes everything and changes the way that you look at everything.
I've been processing quite a bit, just like the idea um, of things that are black and white and the things that are in color.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's very safe to talk in terms that are black and white. It's very safe. It isn't that fun to talk about things that are in black and white, but it's safe. I enjoy talking about things that are in color.
Mm.
And it's in the color that I think joy is found and hope is found, and that the human heartbeat that God intended is found. But it's in the black and white that fear exists, that anxiety and control, and all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think Easter and the conquering of death even turns death itself into a colorful, and I'm totally not saying colorful as in happy and good,
Mhm.
but colorful as
You see.
you see it,
Mhm.
that you find him there. A bunch of people, and it's really easy to have a a a, a faith that is black and white, but is void of the presence of God.
Mhm.
And then you find him, and it seems that everything turns into color.
Mhm.
When
I
I
th- oh, go
Oh yeah,
ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like with that too. I think with God in the equation, it almost brings meaning and purpose to all of these things that we walk through. Like truthfully, I don't understand how it is possible to navigate through life without the hope of resurrection, right? Without the hope of what is yet to come. Like I don't know if you guys paid attention back in like science class or anything.
Nope.
I don't.
What
I don't
year?
yeah, right. But which law is it that says
Anything before the age of 25.
but you guys probably know this law,
It's a
right? This
blur.
law of and I forget which one it is, but it's like for every reaction, there is an opposite and equal reaction.
Sure.
And so for me, when I think about things like the death of a loved one or loss and these things that, like, objectively speaking, are incredibly tragic,
Yep.
it is so sad that most of the world just stops there. And they go, okay, this is all there is. There's this awful, evil, broken world where people die and we experience suffering. But even if we just follow the laws of physics, right?
Yep.
It's like, okay, well, there's actually an opposite reaction to that. And so if the action is death and it is loss and is pain, well, the reaction is life, it is resurrection, it is hope. And so for me, like, that's the hope of the gospel right there. It's like, hey, here's all these things you experience, but guess what? There's something better happening. And one day you're going to be able to step into that. And so, like, this is why I even love what you guys called just that whole Lenten series and Holy Week series is the Resurrection Chronicles. Like, there's something so beautiful about that, and this invitation that we actually get to step in as a people of resurrection. Like, it's not just this, oh yeah, it happened like, a couple thousand years ago. It's like, no, it is happening. It is going to continue to happen. This
Yep.
is actually the identity that shapes us, and there's hope.
It's a participation
Yeah.
sport, right? Like the resurrection is not something to point at and say, I believe that happened.
Yeah.
It is a participation sport.
Like I'm experiencing
I am
this
experiencing the resurrection today.
Mm.
The body of Christ is the proof that it happened.
right now.
I am a part of the body of Christ, and the question is how am I participating in it?
Well, that was something that we talked about. I think it was probably on Saturday of Holy Week, where we talked about it's like Jesus could have died, and that
Yeah.
could have been it,
Yep.
and that would have been great. Like
All our sins are paid
Yeah,
for. Our
we-
debts are paid for.
we would have died in peace.
Yep.
But he brought something more, and he invites us into something more that is like ongoing and like reoccurring. And to that like black and white thinking, for a long time, most of my theology was kind of based on this concept of God's wrath is against sin. And that shouldn't be thrown out. There's an element of that that's like really good to think about. But when the core of my thinking switched to God's life is against death,
Mm.
that's when what you were talking about really
That's
opened
really
up.
good.
Mm.
And that's when I was able to like, I don't know, like I think I was like watching a hockey game the other day and something happened and it's like, there it is. Like there's the gospel. And I forget what it was, but like I was driving with my kids again and they were
I'm gonna drive with you.
No,
for-
it's-
I'm gonna learn
I'm
stuff.
Profound experiences in that
I'm
car.
talking about the highlights here. Most of the time they're yelling, I'm yelling,
yeah.
there's lots of yelling. But in one of these like not common moments, like I think it was on the way back from the day that I described when we were still like kind of talking about this whole resurrection piece. And I remember how it started. Edison was like looking through this like comic book Bible.
As he does.
I know this is like I am really focusing on one magical day.
This is your Instagram.
Like,
Instagram.
Highlight reel.
This is really
One
like
magical
this is
day.
a half-hour period that looks really good. Come follow me for a day. and
There
you'll
was a
see
time he was
reality.
just baptizing people.
Look, I leveraged the moment here.
Dude,
Okay.
yeah.
Speaking in
It's
tongues.
great story, great
A
story.
prophetic word for
Yeah.
you.
So he came to like the story of like Ezekiel walking through this valley of dry bones, and there was this picture of like this skeleton that was like growing muscle, and there was like a bare eyeball. He's like, "What is this? This is awesome!"
This is awesome.
And that's what kicked off the conversation. I remember now because it was like, "Oh yeah, like this is God bringing dead things back to life.
Mhm.
This is what God does." And it's been fun teaching my kids this is the core of who God is.
Mm.
And on the way home, like because it's spring and like I'm so sick of dead trees,
Mhm.
like we play this game, it's like look for green on trees. And telling them it's like that's what's so cool about like Easter being during this time of year because dead things are being brought back to life. Like, and again, like this is what God does. He brings dead things back to life. And when your whole focus is on a black and white concept,
Yeah.
you miss a lot of the color
Mm.
that you were talking about. And literally in this case, it's like when you get into this place of you see the spectrum of color of the life of God, things like just seeing a touch of green in trees is like, there it is. Like
Mm.
it's, I don't know.
What I think sometimes like we miss out on that beauty when we think the whole point of resurrection was to save us from our sins.
Mm-hmm.
Like and when that's the only picture of what Christianity is, it's like, well, man, no wonder why so many people end up walking away from it
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
because we're not actually giving them the real story. Like you go back to the Garden of Eden, we weren't created just to be sinless people. We were actually created for a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And we were given this world to be able to live in and to be able to explore and to do life with God. And to know that that's actually what Jesus invites us into. Like that's what resurrection is about. And it's not just to experience that once we die. It's actually this thing we get invited into right now and we get to be a part of and we get to experience. And so I don't know. I'm just excited that you guys see Christianity this way. And that our church really does too, that it's not just say a prayer, believe a couple things and you're good to go. It's like, no, like there is this adventure God has invited us into. And it's crazy and it is full of loss, but there's so much life and beauty in the midst of that too.
Yeah, like Pastor Allen has this passionate to talk about a whole heart, like the
Mhm.
wholehearted
Right.
experience. And I think like there is the invitation to be wholehearted in this this journey going forward, and to experience the fullness of how all things are intended to be experienced and perceived and engaged and participated in. And I just think it's a really beautiful it's a beautiful thing to say I can experience my whole heart as I engage his whole heart. That as I pursue him, he pursues me.
Yeah.
Going back to Pastor John's podcast, the intimacy with Jesus, I want to be close to him. Like all of these things kind of swim in the same pool,
Mhm.
and it doesn't have to be the old person who has a swim cap going back and forth and doing laps. There can be blow up toys in the pool and,
I love
and
that.
floaties and big diving boards and tiny diving boards. And I mean, like the wholehearted experience in color. I think that's the thing I'm going for.
I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
that.
And not even like the boundary lines of a pool, but the water goes all the way to the horizon.
Mm.
Like,
That's kind of actually terrifying to me.
oh,
That
right.
might be-
Okay.
I was like, I started
Well,
sweating, like, let's do a little pull.
how about the rope
Skinny
with the
one.
little buoys?
Okay,
that just
yeah,
like,
yeah,
okay,
you got something to hold on to.
yeah. You can see the endlessness,
There's
but you're
sharks
in
out I think I find myself, I love this conversation listening to you guys and the perspective that you have. The black and white theology or the thinking of like, I hope this is true. This is real. And I think I'm 42 years old and have never experienced loss, like true deep loss. Great loss is what I would call that. And I can't be the only one, right? Like I hope not. But it's so interesting to hear you guys talk about that. And, obviously rather than having gone through the experience and seeing this beautiful, life in color kind of thing, I fear the experience.
So in the book of Psalms, okay, so I'm just going to bring this
That's
in
okay.
because it's unpolished. So in the summer, there's going to be a sermon series on the book of Psalms.
Yeah.
And one of the key components that's very exciting for us to engage is the fact that throughout the journey of King David, he encountered a lot of tragedy, hardship, sin, chaos, darkness, and how the typical people experience those things,
Mhm.
it causes them to pull from God. It causes them to separate from God.
Mhm.
It causes them to say, does God even exist because these bad things happen? The average psalm is King David banging on the door of God saying, it's time to talk.
Mm.
So during times of the darkness, times of pain, times of tragedy, times of death, David dives into the heart of God. It doesn't do the opposite.
Yeah.
And there's something very special
Mhm.
about the experience. There's something special about death
Yeah.
because Jesus came to conquer death. And so if you and death don't have something going on,
Mhm. Yeah.
there's like a key component there of Jesus that you're not going to see until it happens, and it is going to happen. If you in pain and you in suffering don't have this hand-holding experience, if all you're doing is trying to find Jesus in the joy and happiness and playing a harp, the odds are that's a very, very tiny,
Small.
tiny expression.
Well, and
Small
so
pool.
You think about it like an
Small.
iceberg, right? Like that's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
The depth that I think we get to know Jesus in.
Right.
It's the stuff underneath the surface, the stuff that none of us ever want to go through, but it's the stuff that I think we need to really go through to be able to understand the heart of God. Because it's easy to say, man, God, you're amazing. We love you because my life is so awesome and everything is great.
Circumstantial.
But to be at a place where you can say, no, Jesus, I love you. You're amazing, when you're in the midst of a season of loss and heartache, and Jesus is still showing up in that place, like that's, yeah, you can't communicate who that Jesus is. All you can say is, but I knew him and he met me there.
That's great.
That what you said ties into something that stuck out to me and what you talked about this last weekend of just like most of us, we go about our lives subconsciously or consciously trying to distract ourselves from the reality of like, we're gonna die, which kind of shifts like the limited black and white thinking into like an area of thinking that I've seen a lot of people go into where it's just white. Like there isn't even black. Like it's not even like
Everything is awesome.
one of two. Instead of like the spectrum, this endless spectrum, it's not two, it's like one.
Yeah.
And people can't even acknowledge black because everything has to be white.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
God closed the door, he probably opened the window.
Yeah. And
This is gonna be good for me.
and to only like seek Jesus in like the good and the joy, it's not just a small expression, but you're missing him in the most crucial area that like we absolutely need him. So it's like not only do we get like a small taste of Jesus in the good, but we're completely void of what we need from him when life really hits the fan. And that's awful.
Or I don't even think it's hitting the fan. It just is.
Yeah.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's so true.
It
Yep.
just is. It's
Yep.
not bad.
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
like this is a surprise
Yep.
that hard things happen.
Yeah.
It just is.
Yep.
But to have
Yes.
the perception that you are surprised
Right.
Yeah.
during the
Yes.
times uncomfortable things happen.
Yes.
Or uncomfortable things are the antithesis of God.
Yeah.
There's a whole thing there.
Yeah.
But he's actually sitting in the center of it saying, come, yeah.
Oh, thank you. This was great. This is gonna be good for me.
You're like,
I
dang
can
it, I don't
feel
want
it
this, but
already.
it's
I
going to
don't
be
want
good.
this, but it's gonna be good. Hey guys, we are going to be dropping these probably every Friday, is our plan for right now. So be sure to, if you're watching us on YouTube, we will link Nate's message that we were talking about here below. And we hope you just follow along with this new fun adventure.